Hey everyone, so we're going to be jumping into our next case study on World War II. We're going to be looking at Pearl Harbor and Japanese internment. So that is our plan for today. It's going to be about a 10-minute lecture, so a little shorter than last time. And then you guys are going to listen to a song that was written about, it was somebody from Fort Minor, which is a band. His grandfather was interned in a Japanese internment camp, so you're going to listen to the song that he wrote. It's actually really good. And all you have to do is mark that you watched the lecture and that you listened to the song, and you get credit for today. Just continue your notes on the same spot that you've been doing them, and let's get into it. So, as you guys know, the United States officially gets involved with World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor. President FDR, on the day that it happened, he gets onto the news or onto the radio. He makes an address before Congress, and he says this is a day which will live in infamy. So that's kind of the famous line that he said, pretty much meaning like, we are not going to forget this day in American history because of just how terrible it was. December 7th, 1941, he was like, Americans will not forget. And the reason that the attack happened in the first place, I know we talked about this last year a bit, but Hideki Tojo, which was one of the military generals in Japan, said of Pearl Harbor, which was obviously a very strong American military base, naval base, said that it was a dagger aimed at Japan's heart. So he was like, I know the risk and the danger here. They're positioned to strike Japan and our whole goal for a Japanese empire in the Pacific. And he felt like Hawaii was threatening that. So the attack happened at dawn. There were 2,403 Americans killed, 1,178 were wounded, 21 ships were damaged. And truthfully, you guys, the reason that America wasn't out of it at this point was because we happened to have 4 of our aircraft carriers and a few battleships and other ships that were out on patrol, and were not actually in the harbor, which they usually were. And aircraft carriers, as you guys will see later on in this unit, was how most of World War II was fought, in the Pacific. And if we had not had those aircraft carriers, things would have been a lot different. But still devastating. Damaged 21 ships, many of which were sunk, and many of the soldiers died trapped in those sinking ships. Like the Arizona is probably one of the most famous ones. So this launches us into war with Japan. So after Pearl Harbor, and after the United States declares war, after FDR's speech, the Japanese immediately take the Philippines. If you guys remember from our unit on imperialism, the United States controlled the Philippines after they took it from Spain. But they weren't really in a position to defend it very well. We did have soldiers that were stationed in the Philippines, but they weren't in a position because the Philippines is so close to Japan. Japan was able to overpower Americans there and take it over. So the American soldiers that were stationed there surrendered. Because they were overpowered, and that's what you do when you're overpowered in war. Except for the reason I have it disgracefully, and I don't know if you talked about this, 6th period, I don't know if you guys talked about this with your teachers last year, but Academy kids, I know that you know this. Just sort of like the kind of dishonor that was associated with surrendering. Japanese people and their custom did not believe that it was honorable to surrender, that you should instead fight to the death or commit seppuku, which is the ritual suicide, if you surrendered. So even though this wasn't an American custom, they applied that same way of thinking to the American POWs. So they were like, that's so disgraceful that you would surrender. How could you do that? And so they treated American prisoners of war terribly. And something that we also talked about last year was how Japan was not actually shy about broadcasting what they were doing. They took a lot of photographic evidence. All of these are pictures from the Bataan March, which was marching. It was a 65-mile march from where they captured the American POWs, where they surrendered, marching them to Bataan, which is where they kept them imprisoned for the duration of the war. So it was a 65-mile march to the camps, and along the way there was soldiers that were beheaded, they were starved, they were waterboarded, as you guys can see here. They were forced to dig their own graves and then shot into those graves. I mean, the treatment was absolutely terrible, and Americans back home find out about this treatment of the prisoners of war, and so it fuels this like very aggressive anti-Japanese sentiment that already was there because of this attack on Pearl Harbor. However, there were lots of people, lots of Japanese people living in the United States of America, some of which had immigrated from Japan, and then some of which were Japanese American. They were born in America. Their parents had immigrated, or grandparents had immigrated from Japan. So after Pearl Harbor, there were actually 33,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans that joined the war on the side of the United States. And then thousands more actually volunteered as spies and interpreters. So this was crucial because their spying was incredibly effective, and interpreting was huge because they could interpret for soldiers that were on the front lines, and they were fighting alongside of them, helping them to interpret whatever messages were coming through on Japanese radio or whatever else was coming through during the war. However, these contributions made by Japanese Americans in many Americans' minds did not kind of like quell the anti-Japanese sentiment. If anyone has ever been to Land's End by the Golden Gate Bridge, I mean, the entire west coast of the United States of America was prepared for Japan to attack us. So a lot of the very anti-Japanese sentiment was centered on the west coast because that's where the army was stationed, the military was stationed, the navy was stationed, kind of ready and preparing for Japan to attack. And for a long time, you guys, it looked like Japan might make it to the United States. Things were not going well for the US at first. So in response to this like very aggressive anti-Japanese sentiment, President FDR issues Executive Order 9066, which presidents have the ability to issue these executive orders. It was issued in 1942, and the executive order called for the removal and internment of Japanese Americans. So Nisei were Japanese Americans that were living and had been born in the United States. And then I think it was Issei is how you would define somebody that was... so Nisei is if your parents were born in Japan but you were born here, and then Issei is if you were born in Japan. So anyway, that was confusing, but Japanese Americans were forced to be removed and interned in camps. What they said is these camps are not going to be bad. We're going to put you into these camps to watch you, have you under surveillance and military guard in order to make sure that you're not passing secrets to the Japanese government. Now, this is obviously incredibly frustrating for Japanese Americans who don't see themselves as Japanese. They see themselves as American, and many of them are American citizens. All of them, if they were Nisei, were American citizens. Active parts of the American economy with businesses, etc. All of that they were forced to put aside, forced to leave their homes, and go to these camps to live for the duration of the war. And there were a lot of people that the anti-Japanese sentiment, especially on the West Coast, was terrible. Here's some pictures. You guys can see, so there's a lot of stores that had to close down, businesses that had been operating very successfully. You guys saw a lot of this sort of like Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood, so a lot of this sentiment. But I think a really actually important point to mention about this picture is this is actually taken after World War II ends. So it's not like all of a sudden everyone wakes up one day and is fine with these Japanese Americans who have been interned in these camps coming back and rebuilding their lives and restarting. And a lot of Japanese people, when they came home, found their homes vandalized, broken into, etc. Here's a picture from Pulaiyup, which was an internment camp up in Seattle, so again, along the West Coast. But I want to show you these pictures, mainly because I don't know how many of you guys have ever gone shopping at the Tanforan shopping mall, which is sort of like in, it's not quite Daly City, it's like South San Francisco. But there used to be this huge horse track that was there for racing. They actually converted the horse track, and these are the stables that the horses stayed in, and they converted these to like little homes. And Japanese Americans, they were I think there's about 8,000 Japanese Americans that were interned in the Tanforan area. They later obviously built a mall over this area, but that exact spot is where there were like over 8,000 Japanese Americans interned. So you guys are going to, I'm not going to play it right now. You guys will see the video. There's a link to it. If I play it right now, they're going to take my video down for copyright. You guys are going to listen to this story of Kenji, which is Mike Shinoda's grandfather. And I want you guys to just listen along, kind of tell me what stands out to you. I'm going to ask you what part stood out to you most in a little question thing. Make sure you respond to the quiz so you get credit for watching this lecture. And then we'll do an activity on it next week on Monday. And I will talk to you guys then.